And so forgiveness is a very, very important thing. But forgiveness requires something that we want to talk about today. Is our number 3 here on? Yeah, here we go. Reclaiming your marriage. That's a marriage seminar that we call it. We want to reverse hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. You know that one of the most basic and deepest needs of a person is to know that you're loved. To know that somebody really, genuinely cares about you. We all need that. People will do almost anything to get that kind of love or attention or something. When they don't get the love in the home, sometimes kids will really act up and make a lot of trouble, because it's better to get negative attention than to get no attention at all. At least they're getting some kind of attention. They need love. Now, in our Mennonite circles, one of the problems that comes out of that, we want some kind of acceptance. And so we have these very strict rules sometimes in our conservative communities. There are strict rules and so on. And so in order to be accepted, to be part of the group, we conform to the rules and we go along with them and we pretend that we're okay with them, even though sometimes we totally disagree with them. You know, my uncle, John Klassen, is part of a family that grew up Old Colony, right? But there was a number of men in that family, including my dad, who hated the hypocrisy. My dad was excommunicated around the time I was born for driving a truck. Met gumreifen. And he refused to go before the church and confess that as sin so that he would be reinstated into the church, because he didn't see it as sin. How can that be sin? And so he refused to be a hypocrite. But a lot of people do. They go, there's many a person has been excommunicated who has then gone back and confessed to it, but genuinely in their heart, never really being sorry for driving a truck, because they never really saw it as sin. And then years later, of course, that was reversed, right? We want to talk about hypocrisy because in order to get love, sometimes we will conform and we will do what we think the other person wants to accept me and to love me. In a guy-girl relationship, girls will often play at sex with guys in order to get love. And guys are willing to play at love, pretend at love, in order to get sex. And both of those are hypocritical. They're actually wrong. I want to tell you a little story about a man that was born in the 1600s in France. He was born to a baker whose name was Vidocq. And this son of this baker began to rebel against his father. He ran away from home and became a thief. He would steal. That was his profession. He became not just an ordinary thief, but a master thief. He was really, really good. And he would steal anything and everything that he could get his hands on. His ability to steal was equaled by his ability to escape whenever he was caught. Vidocq was caught many times and put in jail. But over and over and over again, they would come to his cell and want to prosecute him or something, and he wasn't there. He was gone. Somehow he had escaped prison, and he became not just a master thief, but a master escapist from prison. And he was extremely good. He could easily slip out of jail, free himself from a galley ship where many prisoners were condemned to, and masterfully avoid the vengeance of fellow prisoners. He was so good at what he was doing that he even walked into the middle of a courtroom and freed one of his fellow thieves from the police and walked out with him. And the police did nothing to stop them. He was a master at this. Well, with time and the faithful and persistent work of the police, Vidocq's life changed, and he became a detective for the police department. Working for the other side now, he was able to walk right into the middle of a bunch of lawbreakers, arrest the guy that he wanted to arrest, and walk out with them without anybody trying to stop him. He became the best policeman ever in apprehending thieves or lawbreakers. And most of the time he did this single-handed and without being armed. He is credited with capturing as many as 20,000 criminals in the slums of Paris alone. He was a master of it. And what was his secret? His secret was the fact that he was a master at disguising himself. He was able to make up his face and use makeup and stuff and make himself to be somebody totally different than he really was. So he could walk into the thieves' den as a thief, and nobody would recognize him for who he was, and they would just go right along with him, and he'd walk right out with them, including with thieves when he was still a lawbreaker. And so this word, hypocrisy, comes from the word of that makeup, or putting on a mask. Back in those days, if you wanted to do a play or an acting, a play, what you would do is you would put on a mask of some kind, and then you would do this play, and this was called, this was known as hypocrisy or hypocrisy. Basically, it meant that someone was acting under a pretended part or feigned part. It would mean to pretend to be something that in reality you are not. And that's what hypocrisy has come to mean. And that's exactly what this Vidocq did. He would disguise himself in the most masterful ways, and people would have no idea who he was. And they would follow him, and he was and he just did this for the rest of his life. And so hypocrisy is that way. A hypocrite has two sides, or is two-faced. On the one side, he says one thing, but on the other, he is something else than he says he is. What you see is not really the real thing. It is just a mask that covers up the real person underneath the mask. What you see or what you hear is not really the truth. You, the receiver, is deceived into believing that what you perceive to be the truth is the truth, when in actual fact it is not. So we want to talk about this a little bit, about hypocrisy. There's that story. So what is hypocrisy? Matthew chapter 15, verses 7 to 9 says, "Hypocrites! Well did Isaiah prophesy about you, saying, 'These people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men.'" Jesus was condemning the Pharisees and so on for drawing near to God with their mouth and with their lips. They were saying, "I love God," but in their heart there was really no genuine love. This is what happens when a young fella approaches a young girl and he sweet talks her. Remember we talked about sweet talking? And he sweet talks her into, because he wants to go out with her. He wants to do things with her that maybe her conscience is not going to allow. So he sweet talks her, and he tries to make her feel like very special and that he really, really loves her. When in reality, he's actually being extremely selfish, and he just wants something that he wants rather than he genuinely loves the girl. Children can pretend to be submissive to parents, but inwardly be rebellious. I don't know if you know this story. I've told it in Seminole, but there was a schoolboy. He was not being very attentive in school class, and so the teacher warned him that if he wouldn't quiet down and pay attention, and he would have to go and stand in the corner. And because he didn't quiet down and pay attention, she finally told him, "Okay, Johnny, go and stand in the corner." And Johnny said, no, I'm not going to go and stand in the corner. And then the teacher says, either you go and stand in the corner or else. And because Johnny did not like the or else, knowing that that meant trouble, he decided to get up and go and stand in the corner. But as he's walking to the corner, he's heard whispering to him or talking to himself, I may be standing on the outside, but I am still sitting on the inside. That's hypocrisy. That's a kid who obeys on the outside, but on the inside he's still in rebellion. A person can pretend to have an intimate relationship with God when in reality there is none. He may choose hypocrisy to gain acceptance or to impress others with his spirituality. And I wonder how many people go to church Sunday morning to sit in church Sunday morning, but the rest of the week they don't live it at all, what they want people to believe they are on Sunday mornings. You ever get up Sunday morning and you've gotten up a little bit late and your kids are grumpy and there's all this fighting and arguing going on in the house, and finally you get your kids all ready and you're rushing them out the door and you're getting in the car and you get them to church, and all the way to church there's arguing and fighting and stuff, and you're, don't make me get back there. And you're driving and you're threatening your kids. You get to church in the parking lot and you open the door in the parking lot. What happens? You put on this great happy smile. You walk into church. How are you today? Oh, wonderful. How about you? Yeah. Well, so we pretend this great, wonderful, blessed family all morning, and we get back in the car and the fighting continues on, and we go home fighting, right? You ever done that? Some families sometimes do. That is hypocritical. It is hypocrisy not expressing what is truly on the inside for fear that someone may find out and reject you. Years ago, in pre-marriage sessions, I had done 4 sessions with this one couple, and I just deeply felt there was something seriously wrong in these sessions. Something wasn't coming out, and I just really struggled with it, and my conscience just wasn't at peace, and I finally decided that I cannot do this wedding unless whatever it is that's going on here that I don't understand and what it is, somebody's hiding something, that I just don't have a clear conscience to pray God's blessing on this marriage. And so in this next session, the 5th pre-marriage session, if it doesn't come out, I am going to tell them I can't do your wedding because I just don't have a free conscience about it. And I knew that would hurt the couple extremely deeply. But I didn't know what else to do. And so I finally decided that what I would do is I would fast for 3 days. Jesus says that some of these do not come out except by prayer and fasting. What he meant what some of these are, but I figured maybe the secret of what's going on here can come out if I do some prayer and fasting. So I spent 3 days fasting, not eating, just drinking water and praying for this couple from Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday at 2 in the afternoon we had that 5th session. So I sat down with this couple, and there's 1 or 2 people here that know how I lead people into talking to Jesus and just talking to Jesus. Jesus, do you love me? Do you care about me? And they ask Jesus, and Jesus gives them an answer in their heart. And so I led this girl in the session to talk to Jesus about something. And all of a sudden she stopped, very frustrated, and she said, Jesus just isn't hearing me. And I was thinking, I think we're starting to push the right button. So I asked her, you think there's anything in your life that maybe why Jesus would not want to hear you? No, not that I know of. Okay. And then I was praying and asking Jesus, give me a question. What do I ask this girl? And this is the question that came to mind, and so I asked her this question. Has anything ever happened in your life of which you have told yourself you would never, ever tell anybody? No. Well, yeah. But I've swore to myself I would never, ever tell anybody. I says, and now we're at the right place. This is it. I mean, God is answering this prayer. And so I asked her, would it be easier to talk about it if we were alone? The two of us were alone for a little bit. And she says, well, maybe. And so I asked this young fella if he would excuse us and go outside and close the door, and he did. And so I asked her, so what happened in your past? And so she was just crying and weeping, and she began to tell this, when she was a young little girl, something that happened, and of which she was very, very embarrassed. And she really deeply, very strongly felt that if she ever told anybody, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with her anymore, and nobody would ever want to marry her. So I asked her, well, have you ever asked Jesus for forgiveness for that event and for that thing? And she says, oh, hundreds of times. Well, did you mean it? Well, yeah, of course. Do you know that the first time you ever asked Jesus to forgive you for that he washed you, he forgave you, and he washed you clean from that, and that's been gone? Well, I wish I could believe that, she says. So I said, let's talk to Jesus about it. So I dictated this prayer, and this was the prayer. Jesus, do you really care about me? And she's quite, she asked Jesus the question, she's quiet a little bit, and then this answer that Jesus puts back in her mind is, well, of course I care about you. And so I had her say it out loud. If Jesus gives you a thought, that could be an answer to this prayer, then you just say it out loud, because I don't read minds, okay? Maybe God does, but I can't. And so she said out loud, of course he does. He loves me. He cares about me. And says, Jesus, were you there when this happened in my life? Yes, Jesus said to her in her heart, yes, I was there. Where were you? And Jesus says back to her in her heart, I was holding you so it wouldn't get worse. And she begins to weep. So you really were there? Yes, I was. Jesus, have you forgiven me for this? Oh, absolutely, child. I forgave you the first time. And she's crying. Jesus, thank you for forgiving me. And would you just hold me right now? When all was said and done, and then she says, wow, I feel so much better. And I says, well, are you ready to tell the young fella? She says, well, it makes me nervous. And I said, well, that's okay. If he struggles with it, I'll help him with it. And so I went back outside and I said to the young guy, before we go in, your sweetheart here has something to say to you that may hurt you. So would you just keep from saying anything until she's totally finished? And he just clammed up, all right? I mean, he's just zipped up, and we walked inside, and he sat down. He was staring at me, and I'm sitting on this side of the desk, and he's sitting here, and his fiancée is sitting here. I says, okay, go ahead and tell him, I said to her, and so he looks at her. And she's crying, right? She's crying. And so she starts telling this and telling her whole story, and when she's done, she's just sitting there quietly crying, and he looks at her, looks at me, looks at her, and looks at me, and looks at her. Finally he says, was that it? Is that all? I said, yeah, that about covers it. That's it? She said, yeah. Do you forgive me? And then he says, why should I forgive you? I wasn't even there. I had nothing to do with it. And she says, so you forgive me? Well, if there's anything to, of course I do. So you'll still marry me? Of course I'm going to marry you. So you love me? Yes, I do. And so he just hugged her, and they hugged for a while. And I was going to leave for a while, and I thought, we'll just we better keep a witness here. And anyway, now listen. That couple, this is now like 12 years later, okay? Maybe not quite 12, 9, 10 years later at least. And they're doing exceptionally well, and I think they have either 4 or 5 kids today. And they're doing very well in their marriage. Can you imagine if she had decided not to tell him, not to come out with it, and keep this as a secret in her heart? What would have happened? She's keeping a little secret somewhere in her heart, so that part of her heart is locked up. So when she says, I give you my whole heart, she doesn't mean that, because she's keeping this little part to herself. So he says, and so she's always worried, and there's always this fear of if he finds out, he's going to leave me, right? Right? because she's afraid nobody will want to marry me if they know about the secret. So now she keeps the secret. Well, what would happen after they're married and he finds out about the secret? What's she afraid of now? Well, then he'll leave me and the kids. So he realizes that she is deep down inside, she's not totally free. I mean, you know that when your wife is struggling with something or when your husband is struggling with something. Do you notice it? Do you know? When you're talking and you're realizing there's something not quite. I mean, I noticed it as the pastor sitting on the other side of the desk. Of course he's going to notice it. So he's going to ask her, so what's wrong, sweetheart? Oh, nothing. Really? Are you sure? There's something you're not telling me? And so he's beginning to doubt because he senses that she's lying. And he's beginning to doubt. And Satan is using that doubt to begin to put thoughts in there of what it could be. Oh, you know what she's doing? She's probably cheating on me. I bet you she's cheating with my best friend. All kinds of things, thoughts start. And over the years, he keeps asking about it, and they're having all kinds of fights and arguments, and he accuses her of cheating and all kinds of things. And she keeps lying about it. And finally, one day, she's fed up with it, and she decides to tell him the truth. It was this. And he thinks, really? Is that all? All these problems for these years for that? No way. And he won't believe the truth. You know why not? Because till now she's always been lying to him. And all these problems that they've gone through, all this pain and all these arguments and anger, for that little issue, there's no way, and he won't believe it. And you know why I know that that's the way it works? Because I've had at least 2 sets of grandparents in my office who were ready to divorce because of exactly this scenario. One of them where the girl had, before she ever dated this guy, had kissed somebody else and was embarrassed about it and was afraid to tell him about it because then he wouldn't marry her. And so she's hiding this little secret of having kissed another guy once and wasn't willing to talk about it. And now here they are grandparents already and they're ready to divorce, and she has told him the truth and he won't believe it because for that one kiss we've had all these years of horrible misery and fights. Are you kidding me? There has to be something bigger. Can you see how Satan works? And he can use a small little root, a small little cover-up of hiding the truth, being a hypocrite and not telling the truth, not being transparent, and use that to, over time, create a huge mountain out of it and destroy the marriage. And we have grandparent couple in our community that are separated. Have been for years now already because something like this, and that's how it started. And so we want to learn to be honest and truthful because that's the other side of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is demonstrated in many different ways, but here are a few that the Scripture talks about. When we judge others, Jesus said that we are not to judge lest we be judged. For in the matter in which we judge others, we ourselves are found guilty, right? We have a tendency to judge the things in other people that we ourselves have or are guilty in. When there's something that really bothers you about another person, or there's a particular thing that bothers you in other people, often it's because we are guilty in that ourselves, and we're using our judgmental attitude towards that issue in order to cover our stronghold in that up. That's one way. Many parents have been involved in premarital sex today, and they're so afraid that their kids may all of a sudden, so they talk to their kids about it, but often telling their kids that we never did that because they don't want their kids to do it. That's hypocrisy and judging each other. We had years ago, I had a mother come to my office, and she was so afraid. She says, I'm so afraid that my 16-year-old daughter is going to get sexually involved with a guy all of a sudden. And she was so afraid of it, and I knew her 16-year-old daughter very well, and the way she dressed and the way she acted, she was a prime candidate for that. And I told her that. And she said, so what do I do? So I just asked her, can I ask you a very personal question? And she said, sure, go ahead. Were you and your husband involved sexually with each other before you were married? No. And I just looked her straight in the eyes. And I just smirked a little bit. And I looked her straight in the eyes, and she just began to fluster and stuff like that. Well, yeah. But I've always told our kids no. They don't know that we were, and so that can't have anything to do with this. I said, that you not telling your kids about it, as a matter of fact, you lying to your kids about it has everything to do with it, because that gives Satan a tremendous inroad right into your family to lead them into the same direction, because you are being a hypocrite and you're pretending to be something that you're not, and you're expecting your kids to be something that you are hypocritical about. That doesn't work. Satan will not allow that to happen. So I said, so what do I do now? I said, you talk to your husband and you sit your 2 kids down. And she said, by the way, we have always told our kids that we weren't involved sexually with each other, and my son keeps asking about it. I asked her, so why do you think he's asking you about it? Because he doesn't believe it. That he thinks you're lying to him. He is sensing that something isn't right. He may not know the exact truth, but deep down inside he does know. And that's why he keeps asking. If he trusted you, then he would be satisfied with your answer the first time. That's already your indicator that they know better than you think they do. And you're lying to them. And so what do we do, she asked. I said, well, number one, talk with your husband and sit your 2 kids together, down together, and confess your sin to them. And tell them how you failed and how you lied to them about it, and ask them to forgive you for lying. And then begin to share with them how you conquered this sin in your life. Because lying about it, being hypocritical, when we as parents expect something from our kids that we ourselves are not willing to live, that never works. Because your kids will pick up the example you live much sooner. They will believe what you live any time above what you say they should believe. Does that make sense? So one way the Bible talks about is judging. Number 2, pretending to know God. Matthew 7, verse 21 to 23. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things which I say? Pretending to know God. We can go to church and all kinds of things, but if during the week we're not living what we say we believe on Sunday, Sundays mean nothing to your kids or to your spouse. And by the way, pretending to be something, especially toward your marriage partner, doesn't work. They always know you better than you know yourself, right? You ever want to know somebody, go and ask their spouse about it, and they'll tell you things that maybe that person themselves would never be willing to admit. Pretending to know God when in reality you really don't care much about God. Thirdly, in your attitude of giving. Matthew 6, verse 1 to 4. When you give your alms, do not do as the hypocrites do, who do it openly and in front of everybody to be seen by men and to be honored by them, but do it in secret. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Some people think that means we should never write a check, because then somebody can see your name on it and then they're going to honor you about it. That's not what that means. It's the matter of the heart attitude. We can have just as proud of an attitude trying to keep it secret as we do in giving openly. We are not to be as hypocrites who do it for the honor of men. Just give and don't care what anybody thinks, right? How we give. And then by the attitude of praying, Matthew 6, verse 7 to 14. Do not do as hypocrites do, who go and stand in the street corners and pray with long prayers and big fancy words to be seen by men. But go in your closet and pray in secret, and your Father will reward you openly. Listen, So some people interpret that as saying we should never pray out loud, ever. And so the Old Colony ministers and the Rhinelander ministers will not pray with their people when they go and visit them in the hospitals, because that will be seen as being proud. And that's not what he's saying here. We are not to do it for the honor of people, but we are to minister to one another. Paul and the guys, they prayed together and stuff, and then God called Paul and Barnabas out to go on this mission field. They were praying together and fasting together. It's not that we're not supposed to do it together or let people know that what we're doing, but we're not to do it in order to be honored by men. Listen, how many of you are afraid to pray in public? Okay, be honest with me. Come on. How many of you are afraid to pray in public? Because we haven't learned to do that, right? And what are people going to think? I don't know how to pray. That's often our excuse, right? Right? What are we afraid of? Maybe my words won't be quite as fancy and nice as the next guy's prayer. Do we have a bug in my ear? I do. I'm feeling something. That's beliefs for you, right? That issue of not wanting to stand up and pray out loud because what will people think about me praying? You know that is exactly the same issue of pride as the standing up and praying with long prayers and fancy prayers. That's also pride, and this is the other side of the same pride. Honestly. If we didn't have that pride, we wouldn't care what people would think or whether I have the right words. We would just share before God, what's on our heart. Got it? To think, actually, zo'n grote mens. Kijk je maar hoeveel geld ik heb en wat ik alles heb en hoe goed ik reden kon en zo. That's pride, right? That's obvious pride. But the hidden pride of it is when I can't do all that and I don't have the money, so I feel down here, I'm no good, I can't do anything, nobody loves me. Oh, ik wens ik wil beter. And that feeling, that attitude is the exact same pride. Because we can't measure up to our own measure of pride, and then we run ourselves down, and that's equally bad. Follow me? That is hypocrisy. So what's the effects of hypocrisy? Hypocrisy prevents openness with other people. A person who portrays one personality outwardly while hiding his true actions and feelings can never be open with others. There is a part on the inside that no one knows about, and it is kept hidden because of fear of rejection should others find out. Whatever is in one's heart will eventually come out, the scripture tells us. I have some things reversed. Okay. The effects of hypocrisy, it prevents openness with people. Jesus said everything would come out to light. Oh yeah, and here we are, Luke 12, 2-3. For there's nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the light, and what you have spoken in the inner rooms will be proclaimed in the housetops. Jesus said that everything will one day come out anyway. Sooner or later, your partner will know the real you anyway. I have sometimes struggled with some very, very deep personal things that I knew I needed to share with my wife, and I dreaded it. Because she is going to be so upset or hurt. But I'll tell you that when I would then finally open up and I would, I would share this with her and I would just let it all out and let happen what may happen, I found that my wife is way more gracious than I was thinking she would be. That yes, it hurt. But you wouldn't believe how often she has had to choose to forgive me. When I do this seminar, stuff like that, I'm not in the least little bit standing up here in any way thinking that I deserve to be up here because I know more and live my married life better than other people do. I don't. Most of the things I've learned through mistakes, not because of, I am the kind of guy that not only do I not learn from the first time of mistakes, sometimes I have to do them many times before it finally sticks. Make the same mistakes. Well, anyway, Jesus said that the truth will come out sooner or later anyway. 1 Corinthians 3 says the same thing. Each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on endures, he will receive reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. We can continue on and pretend and stuff, but sooner or later it will be tested. And if it isn't solid, if we're not solid in here, we will suffer great loss. That's basically what it's saying. Hypocrisy sets us up for that. Therefore, laying aside all malice, all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and all evil speaking. Malice is bad, just the bad things in us, the bad attitudes and stuff, depravity, the junky thinking that we do, evil or wickedness, deceit, a trick, guile or subtlety. Hypocrisy is acting under a feigned part or deceiving another by pretending. And envy is ill will, that is jealousy. We want what others want. We're not thankful for what we have. And then evil speaking is backbiting or gossip and such like. Matthew 5:21-22, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. Now listen, I put this in here because God takes it extremely serious what we say and what we say to each other and stuff. That when I read this, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. In other words, he will become liable to the judgment, to the court. Then it says, but I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of the judgment. When we become angry with one another, Jesus is saying we become guilty of murder. We are now shall be in danger of the judgment. There's a translation that puts it a little bit differently. Here it says he will be liable to the judgment, and then he says he will be guilty before the judgment. Whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. The council was what's the highest court? The Supreme Court in the land. If you say to some, if you get angry, you're guilty before the court. If you call somebody Raka, then you're guilty before the Supreme Court. You have no, you're just ultimately guilty. And whoever says you fool shall be in danger of hellfire. He shall be in danger of hellfire. Now listen, you know what that means? If you kill someone, you're liable to the court. You will have to go to court and find out whether you're guilty or not. What makes you guilty of murder or not murder? What's the difference? On what do they base the judgment of guilty or not guilty when you have killed somebody? Evidence? What evidence? Evidence of what? Whether you intended it or not. Right? Did you do this on purpose? Or was it an accident? You're driving down the road and in the dark, and all of a sudden somebody dashes out in front of your vehicle and you just can't stop, and you hit him and he's killed. And you get to go to court because you killed somebody. Well, you didn't intend that. That was an accident, so you will probably be judged as being innocent of murder, right? Because you did not intend it. They judge the heart. And so Jesus says, if you're angry, you're already guilty before the court. Why? Because anger is what causes people to murder. The attitude in the heart is already there. Then he goes on to say this. If you call somebody Raka, you know what the direct translation of that word means? If you call somebody hole in the head, that makes them guilty before the Supreme Court. You know what it means to call somebody a hole in the head? Du dumkap, weißt du nicht? Kost nicht ein Denkreichtum kost. Best de watch. We're questioning their abilities. We're running them down. We're making them out to be idiots. Make sense? When you do that to another person, you are already guilty before the Supreme Court of murder, Jesus says. Then he goes on to say, and he who says, you fool, which directly translated means hole in the heart. That one is now in danger of hellfire. When you question the other person's heart, their intentions. Oh, die Duits dat met fleet. Die gleicht mir eine wenig. Oh, Jana, I bet you that one's not even a Christian. Look at what he did. And we're beginning to question their heart. We're beginning to condemn them. We have a tendency to, when somebody does something we don't like, we condemn them, and then we're calling their hole in the heart. And then we're in danger of hellfire. And all these things here don't make them guilty. It makes me guilty. When I get angry with my brother, when I get angry with my wife, and you know what often makes me angry? When she challenges me or asks me something, and she's right. Deep down inside, I am guilty. And I don't want to admit it. And if she steps on that nerve, I get angry. And sometimes I begin to fight her. I begin to accuse her. And sometimes I may be beginning to judge her and says, well, you don't love me anyway. When I say that, I am calling her a hole in the heart. I question her heart intentions. That makes me guilty before God. The opposite of hypocrisy is sincere, to be sincere. The word sincere means without wax. That's a Latin word for sincere, which in Spanish, how many of you here know Spanish? Quite a few of you. Sincero, right? Is that the Spanish word? Without wax, right? What's wax in Spanish? Anybody here know? Okay, let me tell you. It's cero. I just did. Okay? This is Latin, and Spanish comes from Latin, by the way. It means without wax. The story of sincere comes from the old days. There were these Greek potters that made pottery that took a lot of pride in their pottery, and they did a very good job. They did their very best. They looked for the very best clay, and they made the very best pots that they could. And then when they would fire them in the ovens and burn them, and every once in a while, one of these really nice pots, and all the work they'd put in it, they would crack. So they would throw them out, and they would start fresh. And so these Greek potters, their pots became to be known as to be very, very good quality. Everybody wanted to buy their pots because they knew they were genuine, they were good. They were going to make it because these guys did their very best. They never put second best out there. Well, there was a lot of people that also made pots, but did not have the same commitment to honesty and to hard work, but who wanted the benefit of selling their pots like they were selling theirs. And so they would make pots. They would not use the best clay. They would not go and, and if they were fire the pot, then sometimes the pot would crack, and they said, wow, that's such a waste. So what they would do is they would fill the crack with wax, and then they would paint it and make it look like the Greek pots and sell it like this is a Greek pot. The people would say, wow, yeah, I know Greek pots. They can be trusted. They would buy it, pay good money for it, go home and fill it with beans and put it in the oven and start cooking the beans. And what happens when wax gets hot? It melts. And all of a sudden, this crack appears on this pot, and the beans begin to spill out. And these people realized that they had been fooled. This was a hypocritical pot. It was not really what they were making it to be. So the Greek potters, they started to stamp the bottom of their pots with the words, sincere, without wax. And people would know, okay, this looks like a really good pot and so on. They look at the bottom. It does not say without wax. This could be a fake. We put it aside and they keep looking. They find one that says sincere without wax at the bottom. They would buy that one because they knew that was genuine. And the word sincere today, and that has become the word sincere or without hypocrisy or genuine. Philippians 1 verse 10, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ. That word here, sincere, directly translated means tested by fire. So if you could go to the market and buy one of these pots and say, do you have an oven here? I want to test it before I pay for it, and put it in the oven and let it heat up once real good once and see if any wax melts. See, that's tested by fire. Then you know it would be genuine, right? That's what this word sincere means. Can you understand tested by fire in the Christian sense of that God may sometimes bring very difficult circumstances into your life in order to test your sincerity? Sometimes Christians pretend and they walk along and everything is Jim Dandy until it gets hard, and then all of a sudden the real attitude starts to come out. We start to get angry and all kinds of things. Well, I didn't accept Christ for this. I was promised that if I accepted Christ and everything would go well and all my problems would be solved and everything would just always be sunshine and roses. And it's the testing that begins to test us whether we're sincere about our commitment to Christ or without hypocrisy or pretending. And in our Christian marriage, we need the sincerity of that. Commit yourself, therefore, to be sincere, to be truthful. There's nothing that hurts more than having failed and then lying to your spouse about it. Right? Not only is the problem still there, now there's deceit and lying about it, and lying destroys the trust. And by the way, you can never demand trust from your partner. You can only earn it by being trustworthy. Whether your partner trusts you or not is her or his decision. It's not your decision. And they will make that decision based on, because they live with you 24 hours a day, they will base it on whether they find you to be trustworthy or to be sincere without wax. So commit yourself to be sincere, to be truthful. Allow others to be sincere with you. Listen, just as important to be sincere with your partner, to be truthful, it's also to allow your partner to be truthful with you. You know what that means? That means if your partner decides to tell you the truth, number one, you decide, therefore, not to get angry if that truth hurts. If my wife wants to be honest with me and I get angry and I blow up, she'll quit being honest with me. Right? Why would she want to be honest with me? Because every time she tells me the truth, I just blow up and I don't want to know the truth. So if you want your wife to be honest with you, you need to allow her, or your husband, you need to allow him to be honest with you so you don't blow up. You don't defend yourself. You don't excuse the failure that hurt her, that she's being honest with you about. So you don't excuse yourself. And you don't explain it away. Simply just ask questions. Allow your partner to be honest with you and tell you what hurt them. So they tell you, so instead of getting angry or beginning to argue or excusing it, just ask questions. Can you give me an example of that? What did that do to your heart? An interesting question. What did you understand it to mean when I said this? What did you understand me to mean? I could give you all kinds of examples of me and my wife's relationship that sometimes I say something or she says something and I misunderstand her, so I respond wrong. And so now she's really like, whoa, where's this coming from? And we finally have to back up a little bit and say, okay, let's start over again. Okay, when you said this, what did you mean with that? What did you or when I said this, what did you understand me to say? Right? So we begin to ask questions instead of getting angry. In other words, allow others to be sincere with you. If somebody needs to come and confess something to you, they need to be able to be safe to do it. Right? Okay, do not respond in anger. Replace hypocrisy with genuine love. Learn to be genuinely, to just love your wife or your husband genuinely. Replace hypocrisy, pretending. 1 Corinthians 13, if we speak with the tongue of angels, if we have faith so as to remove mountains, if we give all that we have to the poor and give our body to be burnt, but do not have genuine love, we're just a lot of noise, right? We're hypocrites. Philippians 2:15, Jesus talks about to have the mind which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of man did not consider it to be robbery to be equal with God. He's God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant. He's God, but he took on the attitude of being who knows what a bondservant is? Who can tell me? What's a bondservant? Okay, he had a debt to pay, so he became a voluntary slave to that person whom he owed all this money. A voluntary slave. You choose to be the person's slave. So I'm supposed to have the attitude of a voluntary slave. Well, God made me the head of the home. That makes me the boss, right? I wear the pants in the house. Right? I wear the pants in the house, and I'm going to prove. I got to make sure that my wife is supposed to submit to me, and I am supposed to make sure that she does. Right? No. I'm supposed to learn to love her as Christ loved the church, and Christ did it with an attitude of a voluntary slave, a bond servant. My attitude is one of serving her and making her successful. To develop a servant attitude towards my wife, to make her successful, whatever it takes. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself, became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross, to be willing to do whatever it takes. Therefore, God also highly exalted him and has given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of those in heaven and of those on earth and of those under the earth, that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Let me bypass the rest of this here, and then I want to just in conclusion say this. This thing about being a voluntary slave or learning to serve our partner, our wife, or for the wives, their husbands, to have this attitude of love, I believe is extremely, extremely important. Years ago, I really struggled with a number of things in my relationship with my wife, and there's certain expectations that I had, and when we would talk about these things, my expectations, it would always kind of end up in a bad discussion that didn't end well. And so finally, I decided to give up my expectations and learn to love my wife as she was. I shared with that a couple of nights before. But in that process, as I was one day I was doing this 40-day fast to pray about marriage, I was asking God, 3 days into this fast, God, what do you want to teach me during this 40-day fast? Because you learn a lot more when you're fasting, because your mind becomes a lot clearer. And I wanted to study something worthwhile studying. Clear as day, God asked me in my heart, Dave, do you really love your wife? And I said to God, in my heart, in my mind, I was having this discussion with God, and I said, of course I love my wife. The next question was this, do you love her as I have loved the church and have given myself up for her? And I'm thinking, well, I know what that means, because I use that in pre-marriage sessions all the time. And then it hit me. I said, God, are you asking me this because I'm missing something about loving my wife as you have loved me? Because if that's the case, I'm willing to study that. Would you teach me? And all of a sudden, in the next couple of weeks, God began to open up His Word about loving my wife as Christ loved the church. Well, how did He love me? Well, very quickly and short, there's a number of things that came out. This Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 to 10. Let this mind be in with this attitude that Christ also had. Well, okay, if I want to love as He did, I need to do it with His attitude. He's God, He's ultimate authority, but He took on an attitude, the form of a voluntary slave. So I'm the head of the home, right? By the way, let me ask you a question. When Paul says that the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, whom is he speaking to? Is he speaking to the husband, to the wife, or to them both? Who did Paul say that to? The husband is the head of the wife. How many of you believe he said it to? You all have to answer, okay? One of three, okay? You all have to answer. How many of you think he said it to the husband? Nobody. How many of you think he said it to them both? Some of you. How many of you think he said it to the wife? There are a bunch of you that did not answer. Blaine, who did he say it to?
Both.
You are so wrong. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Listen carefully. Wives, come on. Submit yourselves unto your own husbands. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. Who's he speaking to? The wife. It's none of yours and my business as husband whether my wife submits to me or not. That's her responsibility before God. In obedience to God, she is to submit to her husband. That's her responsibility. And it nowhere says, wives, submit to your own husbands, and husbands, see to it that they do. It just doesn't say that. He goes on to talk to husbands, but he says to husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Not going around proving that you're wearing the pants, but as a voluntary slave serving her and making her successful. Wives, don't you just love it? I always wanted a slave. Right? Right? Come on, women. Thank you. Somebody finally honest and transparent here. Good example. In attitude, we are to be voluntary slaves, not strutting around. Jesus said, when he washed the disciples' feet, he says, I have given you an example of how you are to serve one another by washing the feet. The lowest slave in the house was responsible to wash the guests' feet all the time in Jesus' day. Jesus, as master, gave the example by washing his followers' feet, which was the exact opposite of what they were used to. He was willing by example in his attitude to be the lowest slave and servant to his disciples. Right? With that attitude, we are to serve our wives, not to strut around and like, nu ste predja wat hier, nu ons line weer back on half in dit huis. One man said to me one time, after 12 o'clock at night, because they'd fought all night, and one of the daughters finally called me and said, can you come talk to my parents? They've been fighting all night. And I arrived at the house, and here's the husband in his cowboy boots and his tight jeans and his nice button shirt. He's been dressed just to the T all day and been fighting all day. And he says, nu wou ons line. And I sat down for an hour and explained to him what it means to love your wife and become her servant. Now, meinst die werkelijk te zijn dat ik zal haar dien? Try it, you'll like it. Because she's just going to become the sweetest wife you've ever had. That's what we're called to do, and that's what Jesus said. Jesus said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. To become genuine and learn that servant attitude. Wives, you're called to submit to that servant. Can you see what a mutual submission that becomes? We'll talk more about that tomorrow. But let's all stand together and for prayer. I'll let Blaine make the closing. We'll be dismissed. Father, as we bow before you, I realize that you do not like hypocrisy and pretending in our hearts. And I realize that one of the things that often causes me to not be honest and transparent because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of how my wife might react to if I tell her the truth, or if I am honest. But I acknowledge today that I realize that that fear is not from you, but that's from Satan to scare me into not being honest. And I pray today that if there's anybody here that has a secret in their hearts that needs to come out in the open, would you today, in the name of Jesus Christ, bind the spirit of fear, the fear that keeps us from being transparent, the fear that keeps us from telling the truth. Would you bind that fear and help us to bring out those things that keep our heart bound and closed to our partners. I thank you, Lord, for what you will do. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God the Father and the fellowship of the Spirit guide you into all truth and into complete transparency until you are at that place in your relationship where you are genuine and truthful to each other, where the love and the joy and the peace of the Lord can permeate your relationship, and that trust is developed not because you do everything perfect, but because when you do something that's not perfect, you are free to talk about it. Thank you, Lord, for what you will do. Amen.